When someone hurts us deeply, especially in ways that shatter our trust, it can feel as though they've gotten away with it. Narcissists often move through life leaving behind a trail of broken relationships, confusion, and pain. But here's the truth: they can never truly escape what they've done. Our stories hold weight, and while they may attempt to bury the truth, it has a way of resurfacing. Justice is not always immediate, but truth has endurance. When someone with narcissistic tendencies harms us, their first defense is often denial. They weave lies, spin half-truths, and manipulate stories to protect themselves from accountability. At first, this can be devastating for the person on the receiving end because it feels as though reality itself is being rewritten. They tell others that you are overreacting, they distort facts, and they might even paint themselves as the victim. In that moment, you may question your own memory and doubt the truth of your experience. But here's the reality: the truth has a way of rising. It may be pushed down, ignored, or disguised, but it does not disappear. It waits patiently, steady, and unwavering, ready to emerge when the time is right. The truth is like a seed planted in the ground. You may not see it growing at first, but eventually the roots take hold and it begins to push through the soil. Lies, on the other hand, are like a flimsy cover, fragile and temporary. They may hide the seed for a time, but they cannot stop what is inevitable. A narcissist might gather supporters who believe their version of events, but those who genuinely pay attention will begin to notice cracks. Inconsistencies, patterns, and contradictions begin to surface, and little by little, the truth shows itself. No matter how elaborate the deception, lies are always exhausting to maintain, and sooner or later, they fall apart under their own weight. Think about history, about leaders or individuals who seemed untouchable at one time. For a season, their power, manipulation, or charm convinced many people, but eventually truth revealed itself through survivors speaking up, through evidence, through the undeniable consequences of harmful behavior. The same is true on a personal level. Someone can try to silence your voice, but your lived experience doesn't vanish simply because they refuse to acknowledge it. The truth is not fragile. It does not depend on their acceptance to remain valid. It lives and breathes in your memory, in your healing, and in the ripple effects of their actions. And here's something powerful. The truth doesn't just rise for the world to see, it rises within you. When you begin to trust your own perception again, when you remind yourself that what you felt and experienced was real, you reclaim power they tried to take away. Narcissistic individuals thrive on confusion and gaslighting, but once you step into clarity, their grip weakens. Your truth may feel small at first, like a whisper against the roar of their denial, but whispers grow into voices, and voices grow into movements. By affirming your truth, you set in motion a force that is far stronger than any manipulation. Finally, we must remember that time is often the greatest ally of truth. Lies may win temporary battles, but they never win the war. People who manipulate others often underestimate the long-term power of honesty, integrity, and resilience. While they are busy constructing masks, you are building a foundation, and foundations endure. The truth rises not just to reveal what they've done, but to strengthen who you are becoming. It may not always be visible immediately, but it is inevitable. Just as light always breaks through darkness, the truth will always find a way to rise, no matter how much someone tries to bury it. When someone consistently behaves with cruelty, manipulation, or dishonesty, they may believe they can outrun the consequences. A narcissist, in particular, often relies on charm, denial, or projection to cover their tracks. But actions are not so easily erased. Words can be twisted, but lived experiences cannot be undone. Over time, people begin to connect the dots. A legacy is not built on what someone says about themselves. It is built on how they treat others. No matter how convincing the story they tell, the truth of their behavior always remains imprinted on the lives they've touched. Their actions are their legacy, and they can never fully escape it. Imagine a person who repeatedly betrays trust in relationship. They may find ways to justify it or even convince others that the betrayal wasn't their fault. But each betrayal leaves a mark. The people around them may eventually start to notice a pattern: broken friendships, failed partnerships, strained family ties. One broken bond could be explained away, but a trail of fractured relationships begins to reveal a consistent truth. Over time, what defines this person isn't the image they try to project, but the reality of the damage left behind. Their actions, repeated over time, speak louder than their carefully crafted words. This is why it's so important to understand the difference between image and impact. Narcissistic individuals often invest tremendous energy into image management, being seen as successful, charming, or admirable. But the impact they leave behind tells another story. The people who have been hurt by them, the trust that has been destroyed, the opportunities lost because of selfishness, these are the real markers of who they are. Impact outlasts image, because image is temporary, but the consequences of actions ripple outward long after the performance is over. Even if a narcissist seems to move on and start fresh in a new environment, their legacy follows them. The same patterns of behavior resurface, the same lies are told, and the same manipulations unfold. Eventually, people around them begin to notice the repetition. This is how truth shows up, not in a single event, but in a collection of moments that form an undeniable pattern. Their actions, no matter how much they try to disguise them, become the story that others tell. And no matter how desperately they try to rewrite that story, it is ultimately written by their behavior, not their words. And here's the liberating part for you: their legacy is not your burden to carry. You may feel that their lies or manipulations silence your truth, but in reality, your healing and resilience only amplify the contrast between who they claim to be and who they really are. While their actions define them, your response defines you. They may have chosen a legacy of deception, betrayal, or control, but you are choosing growth, courage, and authenticity. And over time, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. Their actions reveal them, and your healing reveals you. That is the undeniable power of legacy. It always follows us, and no one can escape the truth of what they leave behind. One of the most painful realities of being hurt by a narcissistic person is that they rarely take responsibility. They often deny, minimize, or even blame you for the pain they've caused. That lack of accountability can feel like salt in the wound, because we long for acknowledgement, for someone to say, yes, this happened, and it mattered. But here's the truth: even if they never admit it, your healing itself becomes the evidence. Every step you take toward wholeness testifies to what you endured and how you rose beyond it. Your healing is a witness that cannot be silenced, and it speaks louder than any of their denials. Healing doesn't erase what happened, it transforms it. When you choose to face your pain rather than suppress it, you begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that were broken. You learn to set boundaries, to trust your intuition again, and to rebuild a sense of safety within yourself. Each one of those acts of healing carries a silent power. It is proof that the harm was real, and yet you chose not to be defined by it. You chose to move through it. The narcissist may pretend as though their actions had no impact, but your healing tells the truth. What they did mattered, but it did not destroy you. What's extraordinary about healing is that it doesn't require you to confront them or force them to confess. It requires only that you turn inward, honor your experience, and allow yourself to grow from it. That is what makes healing such a powerful form of resistance. The narcissist may want to control the narrative, to dictate how the story is remembered, but by healing, you take back ownership of the story. You say, this is what I lived, this is what I learned, and this is who I am now. You are no longer defined by their version of events. You are defined by your own resilience. Over time, healing becomes a mirror they cannot escape. Even if they continue their same patterns, Your growth stands as a quiet, undeniable truth. You are stronger, clearer, and more grounded than before. That transformation speaks volumes without you ever needing to argue, defend, or explain yourself. Healing is not about revenge. It is about freedom. And in that freedom, you create a life that reflects your truth, not the distorted story they tried to write for you. Your silent strength is evidence, and it cannot be erased. The most empowering realization is this: healing shifts the balance of power. They may have written the first chapter with pain, but you are writing the rest of the book with courage. That in itself is the witness that stands against their denial. You don't need them to admit what they did because your transformation testifies to it. Every boundary you set, every step toward joy, every moment of peace you reclaim, it all speaks. Your healing is the testimony, the evidence, and the final word. And the beauty of it is that while they remain trapped in their patterns, you move forward into freedom. For a long time, it can feel as if those who manipulate and harm others simply walk away without consequence. A narcissistic person may move on quickly, starting new relationships, crafting new stories, and convincing others of their innocence. From the outside, it looks like they are thriving while you are left to pick up the pieces. That is one of the most painful parts of the experience, believing they've escaped without any accountability. But here's the truth: the world has a way of catching up. Life has a way of circling back, and no one outruns the ripple effects of their choices forever. At first, their charm may carry them. They might win new people over, find fresh opportunities, or even create the illusion of success. But patterns always repeat. The same lies, the same betrayals, the same manipulation. They eventually reappear. And while they may fool people in the short term, over time, more and more individuals begin to recognize the consistency of the harm. A single story can be dismissed, but a trail of broken relationships, distrust, and pain becomes undeniable. The longer they live in deception, the heavier the weight of truth that follows them. The world also catches up in quieter ways through the absence of meaningful connection. When someone lives a life of manipulation, their relationships lack depth and authenticity. They may surround themselves with admirers or enablers, but these connections rarely sustain them in moments of vulnerability or crisis. Genuine love, trust, and intimacy cannot thrive in the soil of deception. So even if they appear successful on the surface, beneath that image lies emptiness. The loneliness they tried to cover up with power or attention eventually rises, and that too is a form of consequence. It's also important to remember that the world isn't always about external justice. It's about internal reality. People who consistently harm others carry the weight of their choices, whether they admit it or not. They live in a cycle of repeating the same behaviors, never truly at peace. Their inability to grow, to take responsibility, or to connect authentically keeps them trapped. While they may avoid facing the truth openly, they cannot escape it internally. That lack of peace, that inability to rest within themselves, is part of how the world catches up. And this is where your perspective shifts. You don't need to chase after justice because life has its own way of balancing. What matters most is that you continue to heal, grow, and rise. The world will catch up with them in ways you may never see, and that's okay. What you will see is the freedom and peace that come when you stop carrying the weight of their choices. They will remain in the prison of their patterns, but you will be walking forward into a life defined not by what they did to you, but by how you overcame it. That is how the world catches up and how you step into your power. When you've been deeply hurt by someone who thrives on control and manipulation, it's natural to crave justice. You want the world to see what they did, to hold them accountable, to finally expose the truth. But the hard reality is that sometimes external justice doesn't come right away or in the way we imagined. And yet, that doesn't mean the truth is powerless. The truth may not free them, but it can absolutely free you. Your freedom is not dependent on their admission, their apology, or their accountability. Your freedom is born when you stand fully in your truth and no longer allow them to dictate your story. Living in denial, either theirs or your own, keeps you bound. When you minimize what happened, silence yourself to keep the peace, or internalize their narrative, you unknowingly carry the weight of their actions on your shoulders. But when you embrace your truth, when you say, "This happened, it mattered, and it changed me," you release yourself from that burden. You're no longer asking them to validate your reality. You validate yourself. And that shift is powerful because it removes their control over you. They don't get to define who you are or what you lived through. The truth, as you hold it, becomes your anchor and your liberation. Freedom through truth also shows up in the choices you begin to make. Once you no longer question your experience, you start setting boundaries with clarity. You choose who you allow into your life, who deserves your trust, and how much of yourself you're willing to give. The truth sharpens your vision. Instead of guessing your instincts, you learn to trust them again. Instead of being trapped in cycles of doubt, you begin to move with confidence. The very act of living in your truth transforms the way you navigate the world. And each step you take in alignment with that truth is a step further away from the power they once held over you. It's important to realize that truth doesn't just set you free, it protects you. When you refuse to buy into someone else's lies, you are less vulnerable to future harm. You become more resilient, more discerning, and less likely to tolerate manipulation. This doesn't mean you'll never be hurt again, but it does mean you'll carry yourself differently. You'll recognize red flags sooner, you'll honor your inner voice quicker, and you'll refuse to settle for anything that diminishes your worth. That is the gift of truth. It not only liberates, it safeguards. Ultimately, the truth sets you free because it allows you to live authentically. You are no longer trapped in the exhausting effort of pretending it didn't happen, pretending it wasn't that bad, or pretending you're okay when you're not. Instead, you get to be real about the pain, real about the healing, real about the strength you found along the way. And that authenticity becomes a light. It guides you toward deeper connections, greater peace, and a future defined not by what someone did to you, but by how you chose to rise beyond it. That is the freedom of truth. It heals, it protects, and it empowers. So here's the truth we must carry with us. No matter how carefully someone tries to bury what they've done, no matter how many stories they rewrite or masks they wear, they can never outrun reality. The truth always has a way of rising. Their actions become their legacy, their patterns catch up with them, and the world eventually reflects back what they've put into it. But the greatest victory isn't in watching them face consequences, it's in choosing your own freedom. Your healing is the most powerful testimony. It is the silent witness that cannot be erased. Every step you take toward peace, every boundary you set, and every ounce of strength you reclaim is evidence that what they did mattered, but it did not define you. That is where your power lies, not in waiting for their downfall, but in choosing your rise. The truth does not need their acknowledgement to be valid. It doesn't need their permission to be real. It already belongs to you. And when you stand in that truth, when you live with authenticity and courage, you step out of their shadow and into your own light. That is freedom. That is resilience. That is the life you deserve. So carry this with you. The narcissist can never escape what they did. But more importantly, you can escape the weight of it. The truth always finds its way. And when it does, it sets you free.